Hey, I'm not really good with the whole YouTube thing. I'm still figuring it out. YouTube, how to make YouTube videos later. Right now, this is pretty much all I know how to do. Is just to click my webcam and just to go. So enjoy. So I get this question a lot, and it usually revolves around, can I drive? Because I have autism. And I can drive with autism, and a lot of times I'd get offended by the question. Um, and then recently, someone with autism asked me the exact same question, and I really had to look at myself and figure out why that had offended me so badly. And this autistic person seemed to be reaching out for help because they wanted to learn to drive, but they were struggling. And the reality of the situation was, I also struggled very, very much to get my license. I failed my driver's test 3 times, and I just could not drive at all. That was bad. It was bad. And it wasn't so much the autism aspect that was causing the problem with me being able to drive or not. It had to do with the sensory processing disorder that is associated with autism, which was kind of causing me to have a hard time processing the stuff that was coming at me so fast, and very hard for me to be able to focus on what was happening, or I'd get headaches because it's too overwhelming, or really bad anxiety and etc. around it. But I was able to overcome and be able to drive. So I thought I should probably make a video for other people who are struggling like I did about how I was able to overcome that and actually be able to drive. And I'm in the middle. And so the huge thing was being self-aware and kind of knowing where I was having the struggles, which is kind of anxious a little bit, because when you have to look at yourself, it's like, okay, what is causing me to struggle with learning to drive was number one. And when I looked at it, I did realize it was associated with autism and my sensory processing disorder. And that was a hard thing to deal with. And I ended up actually Googling myself, being like, hey, can you actually drive with autism? Because I was so fearful that if I went to the test and they found out I had autism, they would immediately not give me my license. And I had built that up in my head too. So I didn't know who to talk to, because it felt like if I talked to another autistic, they would have treated me the same way that I was kind of treating that question, where I was fluffing it off, where I was like, are you kidding me? And I felt like I had nowhere to turn and stuff to figure out. So the self-reflecting part actually took a very long time for me to figure it out, and I actually got my license quite late in life. Then I found if I, decreased the extra sensories that were coming at me, it would help me learn to drive. So using the same vehicle, I always use the same vehicle if it's available constantly. Even for my learner's test, it was not my vehicle's, it was a driver's trainer's vehicle. I paid to have that vehicle, even though I had other vehicles offered to me for free. Since I had learned on that vehicle, I was like, this is the vehicle I'm going to use, because I'm used to the feeling of everything and all that, and I'm just going to focus on other sensory inputs and not worry about the stuff that I'm already comfortable with. And then I did a lot of exposure to the situation in the environment. I went to a small town, and that's where I took my actual driver's test, and I learned all the roads, and I drove all of them, and I got familiarized with the buildings. Anything that would not change, I familiarized myself with, because then the sensory input would be just the things that did change, which would be the cars, the people, etc., and not so much the other stuff that would not change. So that helped me a lot in just figuring out all that stuff beforehand, and figure out all that sensory stuff, whatever I could control. And then when it actually came to the driver's test, the instructors are really good. And I had always practiced leaving the DMV, or the registration place, because that's where I'm going to start my driver's test. And I'd always practice by turning right. And I'd leave and I'd turn right. I'd leave, I'd turn right. And immediately at my driver's test, the instructor said, okay, now turn right, turn left. And I was freaked out because I had practiced all my sensories for turning left, that I was not prepared to turn right. And I was scared that if I didn't do it, he would dock me points, right? And so I did it, and then immediately it felt wrong. The sensories were too much overload. It was crazy. And I turned to the instructor and I said, like, I'm getting really anxious right now. Would I be able to pull over? And he's like, for sure, pull over. And they'll let you. That is showing a skill that if you're overwhelmed with the situation or with driving or anything, you know how to safely pull over. And so I safely pulled over, and I was not docked for that maneuver at all. I was docked because I drove too slow, but I was not docked for asking if I could pull over at the beginning. And that's the thing, like, they're willing to work with you, so find an instructor that will, that you're like, or a test person, I don't know what the actual title is, that'll work with you. And they were completely fine with me pulling to the side, catching my breath, figuring out where I was situationally, figuring out my sensories, and all that, and then continuing on with the driver's test. Like I said, I went to a small town and did it. I do not drive in big cities. It's just too much changing. Like, even a building can change in a day. It's unexpected and freaks me out. So I still can't drive in big cities, and that's okay. Like, I know my limits, and I'm comfortable within my limits, and I'm proud of where I've come from someone who could not drive because of the sensory inputs to someone who can drive safely with sensory inputs. I also have to always start at my house. It doesn't matter where I'm going. I know how to get anywhere in my town. I live in a smaller city town thing, from my house. So if I went to Walmart, it'd be from my house to Walmart. If I was at a friend's house, I would have to drive back home to go to Walmart. And it does take me extra time to get from point A to point B because I have to backtrack sometimes to be able to get to the location I want to go to. But that's where I'm comfortable, and that's how I know how to get around and how I'm able to deal with the sensory input and stuff. I can drive very limited times, so I usually drive about 15 to 20 minutes before I get a really bad headache from the sensory input. So I just plan driving around that kind of time limit, and I just try not to feel ashamed of it. Like, I still struggle with feeling ashamed of it because people will say stuff to me and do, like, why can't you just do that? Why can't, and it's like, if you explain to people and they don't understand, then they're probably not somebody you want in their life anyways. And my achievements of being able to drive shouldn't be diminished because I can't do it quite like somebody else. And it's a spectrum. So a lot of other autistics who don't have as severe sensory processing disorders will shame you for talking about driving and your driving abilities and anything that you struggle with. And we're already getting that from the general population, that it just does not need to happen with our population too. So it's also a cry for help for you guys just to let autistic voices be heard. It's not going to stop your autistic voice to be heard. Like, you didn't struggle with that, that's fantastic. I did. And I'm hoping that this video, because I get asked by other autistics how I learned to drive, can help make them feel confident if they want to learn about some things that could help them drive and some limitations that they could put on themselves, or figure out how the limitations work for them, like their limits. And I always say that, like, we should be setting our own limits, and I wanted to learn to drive, so I put that out there, and then I figured out within what limits I could, and I became comfortable with it. So I hope that this helps somebody. I don't have a lot of questions about me and driving. I just get, can you drive a lot? So if you guys do have questions, leave in the comment and I can make a part 2. Also, sorry, distracted a little bit. I don't know, anything you guys want to add that can help me reflect a little bit or help me become a more confident driver, please put in the comments. I'm doing this so I can hear other people's voices among my own and reflect on my own voice. So hope that helps. This is very raw footage. I didn't write anything down. I did not. So this is what it is. So be kind. But thank you guys for listening and have a fantastic day. Looking over here for the stop button.